I would like to thank you very much, Dennis, for kindly organizing this event. It is a great honor for me to be here today, and I want to also thank each of you for joining us, both IEEE Computer Society and ACM members. This is a great topic, and I really appreciate the great initiative to organize it and for all of you to spend your valuable time here. Topic for today is future of the IEEE Computer Society conferences. It's a very important topic. I want to make this interactive, so we will, have a few slides that I'll walk through, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And I would love to hear your thoughts and your ideas, as we work to shape the future of the conferences and how we want to move forward here in this space. So also thanks for the kind introduction. My name is Jyotika Athavale. I'm the IEEE Computer Society President-Elect for 2023. I also want to acknowledge Grace Lewis, who served as our VP of Conferences and is also the IEEE Computer Society second VP. This is really her slide deck, that she worked on last year, working on defining the conferences model that we want to adopt as we move forward, and what are the different ways in which we can organize conferences. So I'm stealing her slide deck here with pride, and I'm very proud of the work that she did. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk through the material. So we'll start out with the background and goals. So we'll talk about different conference models. There are multiple models for hybrid conferences that are emerging, and each has benefits and challenges. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of each one of the models as we discuss it. The idea is to hear you and hear your ideas as well, and work together to help define the future of the Computer Society conferences, as many of the conferences are now switching to virtual or hybrid models. And we know some of this started, during the pandemic, but that, this change in the model is here to stay. So we collect ideas for the hybrid conference models, thinking outside of the box to fix the problems of both fully virtual and fully in-person models. And so to kind of see what is kind of that in between that will work most efficiently for everyone, for our members and for our attendees. Identify or create pilots for each of the identified models. And then the fine tune, sharpen the pencil, so to speak, based on feedback with respect to, the costs, the finances, the attendance, the virtual experience, in-person experience, and the infrastructure. So taking all those factors into account. So that's the landscape and, the goals for the discussion. So the trends that we are seeing today across IEEE and the larger events industry. I'm not sure if you're seeing a part of this hidden by the toolbar. Just let me know, Dennis, as we walk through it. Okay, great, thanks. So we have the challenges and the knowledge gained, right? So of course, as we transitioned into this hybrid model with, part virtual, part in person, there was a strain on the volunteers, on the vendors and the staff resources. Volunteers are feeling virtual fatigue, so to speak. There's also an implication with respect to significant time and expenses, having to host fully virtual experience, getting the recordings, getting all of the live streaming, all of that infrastructure set up in addition to the in-person conference organization. So especially for a large conference, that can be pretty substantial. Exhibitors are not satisfied with virtual, and for reasons as we can understand, because the in-person experience with respect to networking and discussions, all of that is missed in the virtual setting. And so for exhibitors, that was not a satisfactory option. Most interaction, networking, social aspects of live events are not reproducible in virtual environments. So that's one of the key pieces of feedback that we received for the fully virtual model, right? So missing out on the networking, on the discussions, attending a technical presentation, but then not being able to have that interaction either with the presenter or with the other, attendees of the conference, missing out on the social events. The knowledge gain, so, there's the pros there. Virtual conferences appeal to broader audiences. You can get more participation. Virtual events can be produced at a much lower cost than in person. And so, you can get wider attendees. You can get wider participation from those folks who are not unable to travel and, are able to dial in at a time that is conducive to multiple geos. Authors will continue to publish no matter what, right? So virtual, in-person, or hybrid, that demand to publish continues to increase in cutting-edge technical areas. So regardless of which model, we will continue to submit papers, we'll continue to have those presentations and publications. So that part would continue. With respect to the knowledge gain. So that's just kind of a high-level summary of the challenges and the knowledge. And now we'll dive deep into each one of the conference models and talk a little bit more about what those look like. So starting with the hybrid conference models. So in 2022, we saw an increase in hybrid conferences. Many conferences have chosen to hold a hybrid conference in 2022 to provide the in-person interaction plus the inclusion of virtual attendees. When we say hybrid here, we mean both in-person and virtual. What is that overlap of the in-person virtual? We'll talk about, but the virtual component was added for multiple reasons, right? One is, of course, because of the pandemic and the COVID situation, but then also travel and visa restrictions for some countries, inability to travel due to cost, other limitations, tightening of travel funds from many universities and institutions. So that virtual component was, catering to the needs of all of the members and attendees who were unable to make it in person. The in-person portion, remained attractive for exhibitors, which is an important source of income for large conferences. So having a mix of both for different portions of the program, the conference was kind of the sweet spot, and that's how different conferences organized their event to cater to the needs of the conference and the different aspects of the program. So here's the fully hybrid model, which is in-person and live streamed, right? So you have the entire program that is virtual as well as in person. So what you're seeing here in the center. So the plenary and the keynotes are in person as well as live streamed. The panels and the award sessions are in person and live streamed. All of the technical paper presentations, the tutorials, workshops, Q&A, all of that is in person and live streamed. Post-conference access to all of the content and the videos is made available to all of the attendees. And then in-person and virtual exhibit, sponsor guide with respect to schedule of interaction. So all of the main program is available both ways. In the virtual offering, you have the social networking events for virtual participants only. And then in the in-person offering, you have the social networking events for in-person participants only. So this is like the fully hybrid model where you have everything, both options. So the virtual folks can get the full experience, and so can the in-person attendees. So what are the benefits of a fully hybrid model? The fully hybrid model offers the virtual and the in-person attendee experience as close to identical as possible, right? And expands the conference reach to those who are unable to travel for various reasons, as we said, cost, pandemic, other visa, whatever other limitations. The challenge is it's difficult, right? It's difficult for the organizers to organize. It's time consuming. It's resource and effort intensive. It's a lot of heavy lifting there. The infrastructure required for live streaming can be extremely expensive. So the high cost, and then the registration fees will likely be higher as well, to address all of those high costs that need to be invested in. And so compared to a fully in-person conference only, the registration fee in this case for a fully hybrid conference can be expected to be higher. So those are some of the challenges. So some of the lessons learned and recommendations from a fully hybrid model. So what we've seen based on the experience in 2022, consider using venues such as universities that may have already made investments in rooms with live streaming capabilities to support hybrid teaching, right? So we're seeing that in the classrooms already, where a lot of the curriculum is now made available via live stream. So that way we can offset some of that investment cost with respect to making the live streaming available at conferences by leveraging those capabilities. Fully virtual registration fee should at least be equal to lowest full in-person registration fees, so that attendees that must cancel due to travel restrictions can easily be moved over. And then plan the conference program as early as possible. So those are some of the afterthought based on what we saw, our learnings from the 2022 experience that we want to carry forward as we plan future events for 2023 that would be fully hybrid. All right, so then the track model. So this is a separate track for virtual and then separate track for in-person attendees. So if we want to do this track model, what does that mean? So we have a virtual track, where there's access to all the live virtual sessions, and you have an in-person track, which has access to all live in-person sessions, plus social and networking events that will be available for in-person only. And then you'll have a common track, which will be available to the virtual and the in-person attendees. So those offerings will be some select offerings, such as the plenary and the keynote would be in person and live stream. The panel and award sessions would be in person and live stream, post-conference access to all in terms of the video and content, and then in-person and virtual exhibit or sponsor guide with respect to scheduler for interaction and virtual meeting rooms. So this is a kind of a little bit of a variation from the fully hybrid model, where you have a separate track, so it's not identical, but you have it's kind of like a variant or off of that fully hybrid approach, where you have a slight difference in terms of the virtual and in-person track, but most of the conference is the same. I'd say about 80% of the conference is live streamed as well as in person. So what are the benefits of the track model? The benefits are that the virtual and the in-person attendees have different but very comparable conference experiences. The challenges are you require scheduling two conferences, so you still have a virtual track, in-person track, so that requires difference in terms of the scheduling. It's a little bit of additional work. And extends the total length of the conference if not simultaneous, right? So it would be a longer period, a longer duration if you're not holding the virtual and the in-person simultaneously. So that it would be asynchronous. So that's kind of the con there for the track model. Some of the lessons learned, we did deploy the track model in 2022 as well. So here are some of the lessons learned and recommendations. So in-person registration should include access to both tracks, right? So the attendees can pick virtual versus in-person. For the in-person portion, schedule events and activities that work better in person. So social events, networking events, poster sessions, exhibitions, birds of a feather sessions, social events. So more of that networking interaction for the in-person portion, and more of the virtual and live streaming for the virtual track or the fully virtual track. So those are the lessons learned for track. Then we have a selective model. So the select model is where the entire conference is mainly in person, but then you are picking a few of those sessions and offering them virtually, right? So you are offering that live stream option for a few select sessions. So here, like you see, the full bubble here is all in person, and then you are picking a subset of that for the virtual experience. The virtual experience may include topics like plenary and keynotes, panel and awards, post-conference access, and in-person virtual exhibit. And then All of the technical presentations will be available in person. So your tutorials, your workshops, your other technical sessions are not part of the select model here, right? So that's all only accessible to the in-person attendees, but you can get access to those materials later on post-conference, right? So this is kind of a select model from that standpoint. So, it's virtual attendees can get access to a subset of the conference. So that's the benefit we just talked about. The virtual attendees get access to some live content, but not all. The challenges are that the virtual attendees get access to technical sessions only after the conference has ended, right? So it's the post-session or the post-conference access to the materials. So you miss out on that Q&A, on the live discussions, etc., and the networking. Organizers need to maintain content and streaming for a period of time after the conference has ended, right? So we saw that with a few conferences last year. I think IRPS was like that as well, where the conference sessions were made available for about a month or so after the conference had ended, so folks could get access to the sessions, could get access to the materials, etc. So even though it wasn't live, you do get access. It's just that you have to wait until later to access those materials. Lessons learned and recommendations from the selective model. So expect a large number of attendees for the live events, given that it is the only live experience for the virtual attendees. While it's difficult to accommodate all time zones, consider where most of the virtual attendees are from when we schedule the live events. So that's always the challenge, to accommodate all of the geos and the time zones. And, you have to select that, to consider where your virtual attendees are and make sure that the live stream works for folks in all of those geos. Post-conference access model, so not really hybrid, right? So this is where it's an entirely in-person conference, and the only thing that's going to be made available to the virtual attendees is the post-conference access to the conference materials. There will be no live streaming. So that's what this model is. The benefits are a lower cost, right? So you reduce the cost of all of that infrastructure needed for the live stream or for the virtual track. It's maybe best for small conferences, workshops, conferences that are trying to drive in-person attendance. Challenges that virtual attendees will only have access to the materials after the conference, and organizers need to maintain that content and streaming for a period of time after the conference has ended. So, if you have a small, like a face-to-face plenary meeting, a workshop, a technical committee meeting that's in person for a small number of attendees, this may be a viable option for that, because the conference is mostly in person and virtual attendees are intended to be small, or if you have a small budget, right? So this may be one to work with there. The lessons learned and recommendations for the post-conference access model is that the content needs to be available as soon as possible so that people can purchase, that people that purchase content see the value, right? So as soon after the conference is ended, all of the materials and the sessions are made available for those who could not travel and make it in person. So here's a summary of the general challenges of hybrid conferences. So in general, these are difficult for the conference organizers and staff to organize. For many, it feels like we are organizing two conferences because hybrid is a mix of in-person and virtual. So you have the overhead of both. And so you need a large number of volunteers, large staff, large budget to organize it. It's expensive. Will affect industry attendance and engagement. So the feedback from attendees is that now, and especially I think most folks can relate to that in the current climate, where employers are limiting, conference participation for employees. In-person attendance at conferences in the future could be just 1 or 2 at the most, I would say, per year. And so most folks would attend virtually. And because attendees may have the option to fall back to virtual attendance, it'll be more difficult to guarantee venue requirements, right, such as room blocks. And then there's the storage consideration. Storing all of this recorded content over time has a cost that will also need to be considered. So in general, high cost, a high effort, it's heavy lifting to organize, and it may not really meet the needs of our attendees going forward, because most folks are going to be limited in terms of the number of conferences they can attend anyway. So thinking beyond hybrid, right? So what else can we do? So the future of the Computer Society conference portfolio is a TC managed and balanced, right? So what that means is we need to find some in-between options. What can we do? Can we combine smaller conferences? So, we can have maybe one or two large in-person or hybrid events, and then have a lot of smaller virtual events that could be combined or lumped together. So communities with mega events formed by co-locating many small events together. So that way, even for attendees, you are reducing the travel cost, because they may travel and attend multiple events that are co-located in the same week at the same location. So we are attaching those small events to a larger anchor conference. And then the conferences, including events across Computer Society, standards meetings, professional education, chapter events, etc. So what does that look like? So here's kind of that orbital model, right? So you have the largest event for the TC, and so you invest in that. You have the organize a large conference, and then co-located with that, you have arranged a lot of those smaller, highly specialized events that could be either hybrid or virtual in nature. But then in person, you may have some smaller events that could be, like we said, the plenary meetings or the smaller workshops, etc. So by lumping together, you are reducing travel cost, organization cost, location cost. And so this may be a good compromise as we move forward. Co-location mode, so the larger and smaller specialty events under the same, move this here. So if you have events that are under the same technical area, you can combine those, in the same time frame, in the same location, pool those resources by co-locating virtual, hybrid, and in-person. So here's again that similar example with respect to co-location. You have the largest event in the TC. You have specialized sub-technical event within the TCs that are kind of lumped together, kind of piggybacking on that large technical event. So you have more optimized cost and resources, and also caters to the needs of the attendees or the members who would join the conference. So what are the benefits of the orbital and co-location model? So the benefits are reduced carbon footprint, right, due to less travel in a year. You can have more conferences, workshops, and events, and you can have more of that in-person experience, where we, see that benefit in terms of the social and the networking, etc. So you can, by reducing cost and lumping together those smaller events with the large event, you are seeing that optimization. Support a variety of formats, examples, student-only events, local meetings, job fairs, one-day workshops, and you get larger attendance. The challenges are, so if you have these multiple events lumped together, you're also looking at submission deadlines for your papers and submissions come all together. So that could be a challenge, right, for authors who want to submit their papers to meet those, simultaneously. And then also in terms of the conference organizers buy-in to have those scheduled together at the same time. So that could be the challenge, in bringing everything at once. So ideas, new conferences can start as virtual only or co-locate until they have a better idea of the interest from the community. Conferences that are not meeting the required budget policies must ask to co-locate or return to virtual. And then consider hosting standards meetings and professional education as part of the event to make it worthwhile for in-person attendees. So I'll give you an example. I currently chair the IEEE P2851 working group, which is a standards working group, and we've been trying to organize a face-to-face plenary for the past 2 years now. It's been a challenge because most of the members in my working group, just myself, there's corporate travel restrictions, so folks can't travel. Prior to that, there were limitations with respect to the pandemic. And so we've been talking about this exact same model, which is, piggybacking onto a large conference and hosting our plenary, face-to-face plenary in that same week, so that folks who would travel for, the big conference, in this case, we were looking at DVCon as one of those conferences, but having the face-to-face discussion and the plenary and the workshop together that same week would cut down the travel cost for folks. So that's kind of an example of the thought process here, in this orbital and co-location kind of mode, and looking at how we can optimize travel and costs. Okay, so fully virtual conferences. So the future of virtual conferences will remain an option because they are extending their communities to attendees that traditionally would not have been able to participate in person. What are the benefits of fully virtual model? Benefits are reduced carbon footprint, no travel, and you bring in a larger, wider attendee distribution, because you're bringing in people who might never been able to travel or attend in person due to cost or other limitations. Challenges are that it's difficult for organizers to schedule sessions that are reasonable for all the speakers and attendees, and it's the in-person experience. So, the second is one that I can really relate to. I mean, I noticed that as well. I attended a lot of conferences last year that were, virtual, but I really missed that in-person experience and interaction that, has a lot of value in conferences, because to be honest, you can always access the materials offline, you can get access to the papers and the sessions, but it's really that networking and that interaction in person with folks across the industry, and having those hallway discussions, on various technical topics, and that, is so important and so valuable in these conferences. So that, I think, is one that you cannot today, at least with today's technology, we haven't been able to replicate that. Lessons learned and recommendations from the fully virtual conferences. New conferences can start as virtual and then move to other models as the community grows. To improve the experience, add events that mimic what is missing from in-person conferences. So we can add mentoring sessions. We can possibly add other, interactive things like online games, coffee breaks, meet a community superstar, or any other. I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts on how, we can make that more useful, more valuable for, our fully virtual experience. And that was the last slide. So I'm going to stop right here. And I just wanted to open it up for Q&A now, and also wanted to once again thank you all for listening and for your valuable time today. So really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Andre, you got your hand up here.
Thank you, Dennis. I just wanted to make a comment. I was the steering committee co-chair of the International Conference on Performance Engineering when we had to do our first virtual conference to salvage a program that was up and ready to go. So we decided 3 weeks before the conference itself, because this was April 2020. We did a couple of things. We asked people to prepare videos of their full talks, but we also had truncated sessions at which they had a short amount of time, and a live Slack channel to facilitate moderation, and also had the added value of providing an archive for the chats. Have you thought about doing anything like that?
Absolutely. So I think for some of the conferences, we have done that. You know, I can tell you, even as a presenter, like, you know, I've been doing the recording and then providing, you know, the recording to the conferences where I'm not able to present live, and you know, the Q&A and all of that transcript is also recorded and is made available, you know, to the attendees who haven't been able to attend the conference, you know, at live, or via live stream, or whenever that was you know, in session. So definitely I have seen that, you know, through the year in both the hybrid and the select model approaches. Did you have a specific example that we should track and look at? Are you suggesting, Andre?
I'll put a URL. We've done 3 of them like that now, but the next one is going to be in person only.
Mm-hmm.
If you go here, I think the stuff is still up there.
I see.
And we found that it was very effective. Obviously, we missed the networking experience. Given that we had to put the first one together under pressure, it was a good way to go. We had corporate sponsorship that meant that anybody could come without paying. And I was teaching a class on testing at the time, and including performance testing, and one of my students asked if he could attend. And that was really gratifying, because it meant that he got some kind of exposure that he wouldn't have been able to get otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll take a look, and you know, it's really great feedback. So thank you, Andre.
Hey, Bob, let's hear your question.
Yeah. So thank you. I've got a question about cost and a question about feedback.
Mm-hmm.
With terms of cost, and you mentioned the cost of archiving videos.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that I can put videos on YouTube and it doesn't cost me anything. And I see lots of technical talks on YouTube. Why can't all the conferences just say we're going to use YouTube and make our conference, and the cost is nothing? That's one thought. The other is and also the cost of streaming and stuff. Lots of times I see people recording a video presentation of this stuff. They might join a little bit afterwards, but it can sometimes it's entirely through live. Really doesn't matter too much directly. I don't understand the costs involved there. The other question is about feedback. Typically, I'll register for a conference. Sometimes I'll register for sessions, but the registering for sessions is more for my scheduling, for a calendar, rather than providing feedback to the conference organizers. If I'm registering, looking at things, schedule papers in advance, and they cluster these things, that can give some feedback to the conference organizers. If a lot of people are registering for a session, make that one virtual, make that one hybrid. That's where I can amortize some of my cost by using the feedback of interest to decide where my cost should be spent. So that's sort of the, can you better make a model that incorporates feedback is the thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think to answer your second question, I think which is more of a comment. I think that's where we are looking to see as we get more and more feedback, and how we can optimize that cost, you know, with the experience and with the resources that we would invest in the conference. But with respect to the YouTube question, I mean, I think the materials are only provided to the members, those who have registered, you know, for the conference, and limited to those folks. You know, it's not openly available on YouTube for, you know, various reasons. And also, you know, given the presentations and with the, you know, having those materials only accessible via IEEE, etc. But limiting the access only to the attendees who have paid the registration, you know, we can't really make it openly accessible on YouTube. So that's the limitation there.
There's private channels. Make the information about the private channel available to the emails of the people who registered, and then it's the same.
Sure. I mean, something to look into for sure. I think it's a good input. You know, I will capture it and you know, investigate it. But thanks for sharing that.
Where's the cost of streaming? Why is that expensive?
So, it depends on what resources you would invest. So if you like we found in our learnings, if you reuse like the classrooms where, we are already using the streaming for like teaching, etc. So there, you can leverage the equipment and the infrastructure, and you can reduce cost. But otherwise, having to invest in that is an added cost, right? So
Having the cameras in every talk, it makes sense to focus the cameras only on the places that you would want to distribute that way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. I think you see a couple more hands.
I had a question. This is Joe Poligra. Again, it was a very, very useful presentation. But since we have technology to leverage, what are the thoughts about maybe instead of having fewer larger conferences, maybe things that are more micro-focused, since the ability to do more conferences but a more targeted audience would basically enable more interest from a group on a particular topic?
Thanks for the question, Joe. So are you saying micro conferences virtual? Did you mean fully virtual?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Since technology allows the ability to do things more frequently, have things that are more targeted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, that was kind of our thinking also in that co-location orbital model, the last one that, on the slides, is where we can have those micro events hosted around the same time or piggybacking on a large conference, so that folks can take advantage of that, and you can have either virtual or co-located, but have those events. So folks can get that in-person experience, and they can attend those micro events as well as the large conference, and they're not paying extra costs for travel, and so lumping it together, having 4 or 5 events maybe in the same week, and even reducing cost from a corporation standpoint. I know even Nvidia right now is limiting travel for conferences, so this way you could optimize it, but certainly I think that was one of the things, as I was mentioning, even in my standards working group plenary, this is the kind of that example, that micro event where we wanted to have it, and for most discussions, they are virtual, but maybe once a year or once in 2 years, you need to have that face-to-face interaction discussion for really meaty brainstorming topics, and want to have maybe a team building event together with that. So that's hard to kind of to have that experience virtually. So that could be one that could be piggybacked on the larger event.
Right. And can I just do a follow-up just to add? Just you mentioned gaming or gamification. Are there any thoughts to maybe using gamification so that if you want to provide, as you described, some linkage between a virtual and in-person event, some form of gamification helps with that? And something that the vendors certainly would like if it provides better participation and feedback.
That's good feedback. Yeah, no, definitely something that we will explore further. So I appreciate the input.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, so as far as fatigue goes, I find a real conference in person to be far more fatiguing than a virtual conference. When I'm in a virtual conference like I am right now, I actually have socks and shoes on tonight, but that's because I was out somewhere else a little before dinner. But I don't have to wear socks and shoes. I can break anytime I want for anything I want without having to disturb other people in the room. So now it is possible to make virtual conferences more fatiguing than they need to be by jam-packing everything as tightly as possible and not allowing for coffee breaks, lunch breaks, so forth. And then another piece, which is in terms of costs. Here's the back of the envelope calculation. My suspicion is a decent engineer fully loaded with benefits and so forth, is costing their employer easily $200,000 a year. Although my numbers may be a little bit out of date because I haven't had to do that calculation in a while. So that's $1,000 a day. So a substantial part of the cost for a conference isn't the cost of the plane ticket or the room. A large part of the cost for a conference is the opportunity costs. You send somebody far away and they aren't working on the stuff that they get paid to work on. Whereas in the case of a virtual conference, when I look at an agenda for a conference, rarely is there more than 30% of the talks that I really want to attend. Okay. If the conference is virtual, I can pick and choose amongst the ones I want, and I can do other productive things in between. Whereas if I'm in Spokane, Washington, 3,000 miles from home and office, and a 10 or 15-minute walk from my hotel, it gets really difficult. And of course, that adds to the conference stress. My usual thought was that after 2 days at a real conference, I was conferenced out. And it was time to take a day off from the conference and do something else. So just some personal observations.
Thank you for sharing. No, I think those are great feedback. And I'm totally with you with respect to, time is money, right? So it's cutting down that travel time for employees, and missing out on that productivity there because of that lost time is a big factor to consider, which is why we were looking at that optimized model, looking at seeing how we can minimize that, maybe just have 2 or 3 events a year, but then have, squeeze in a lot of smaller events during that time. So we have less of that. I think with respect to, the multitasking, as you said, that's, I think optimizing that's a great point. I do the same, for my virtual events as well. If I know there's a select few presentations that I want to attend, and then I, squeeze in my work in between. But I think with respect to the mission of what we do as a computer society, really connecting people, really connecting industries, and really serving as that glue, that's where that interaction and mixing people, that conference experience comes in. That's the part where I personally felt like I missed out. I hear that feedback from others as well, but I'm totally with you with respect to the pros of the virtual experience. So having that combination of that, I think may be the best solution. But just have to work through the model and receive feedback from such as you provided. So thanks for the valuable inputs.